to the channel, everybody. Appreciate you guys coming back. If you guys are new to the channel, appreciate you stopping by and checking it out. What we have for you today in today's video is I'm going to go ahead and go over some old stories from Oregon back in the 1800s about Bigfoot, some of the very first encounters that happened on the Sixes River. So settle in, sit back, get comfortable. Let's do this. Story told of the Indian devils of the Sixes. Back in the 1870s, the South Sixes River was a rather lively mining camp. The tales of rich gravel and big nuggets had attracted gold hunters from far and wide, and as the district was very difficult of access owing to the roughness of the mountain region surrounding it, only the most daring and rugged stampeders ventured in. However, many of those who were fortunate enough to get a claim along the river were sure of a golden harvest, as some of the miners had taken in as much as $1,000 from a single crevice. And I looked it up, that's $20,000 in 2021. Just so you guys know. There were not claims enough to go around owing to the great number of miners, and those without claims busied themselves by prospecting, hunting, or helping claim owners with their work. And as the country at that time teemed with plenty of wildlife, plenty of elk, deer, and bear made an easy meat supply for the camp. There were 3 groups of cabins in the camp in a stretch of about 3 miles. One at the mouth of Butcher Creek called Butchertown, another a mile up the road at Alder Gulch called Bear Pen, and 2 miles further up the river at Rusty Creek was Wendellville. All 3 little hamlets nestling in picturesque grandeur, but busy little gold mining centers. Furnishing meat for the camp was quite an industry and was equal in the matter of dollars and cents to a claim along the river. The chief Nimrod of the district was Mike Madigan, a typical woodsman and hunter, and as he bore scars of some former hand-to-paw combat with a peeved grizzly, he earned the name of Grizzly Mike, and for short they called him Grizz. Grizz was a privileged character wherever he went. His entire equipment consisted of his rifle, belt of cartridges, dragoon, 6-shooters, loaded, bowie knife, pack sack, and 2 big yellow-sided black-backed long-eared hounds, which he called Bounder and Sounder. Old Grizz had a world of confidence in his equipment, and everything but the dogs was pretty well notched, but no one ever had the nerve to ask him about them for the fear of getting notched himself. Everybody's latch string hung out to old Grizz, for he nearly always had a shoulder or a ham in his pack sack. Along in the fall of 1876, the maples were taking on a golden hue. The old buck, deer, and elk were pretty well tallow-coated, and the bear were getting nice and oily, and everything in the whole district was tranquil. It was late in October, and all the miners at Bear Pen had returned to their respective abodes for the night. It was getting late when it was noticed that one of the cabins, that of John Jensen, showed no signs of life. An investigation revealed that Jensen was absent. Search for him began, and he was soon found lying badly beaten and unconscious in the portal of his tunnel. Everything possible was done to restore the injured miner, but to no avail, and he soon passed on to the great beyond and took that horrid secret with him. Jensen had no enemies, and no motive or clues for the heinous crime could be found, and as a result a weird gloom settled over the entire district. For several days the miners sought to unravel the mystery, but to no avail. The heavy gray blood-stained rock that was found by the prostrate victim, weighing 4 pounds, and unlike any other stone in the district, evidently the instrument of death, only served to plunge the whole affair deeper into a realm of mystery. Old Grizz had taken his hounds to the scene and started them to work. He watched them closely as they seemed to scent a cold trail along a deep and bluffy ridge leading up to Star Mountain. Grizz put his fingers to his lips and blew a shrill whistle, and the 2 hounds came bounding back to him. "What's wrong, Grizz?" asked one of his companions. "Them dogs are afeard of something. I never saw them act this way before. 'Tain't no bear nor mountain lion. It is something pretty bad," was the reply. Old Grizz was puzzled, and as he walked slowly back to his cabin, his mind was deeply absorbed in the affair of Jensen's mysterious death. He knew his 2 dogs feared neither man nor beast, and now it was plain to him that they were scared. He knew that when old Sounder and Bounder got their designs and an old Bruin, that if he couldn't take wings like a crow and leave the earth, he was in for a good washing up. And 2, that if anything got in range of his old Sharps, there would be soap in the bathwater. The affair dragged wearily on for a few days when one Sunday morning Doc Elgin, one of the miners, was strolling down the river. The autumn sun had just broken over Dusty Butte and was flooding the river with sunshine. He had just rounded a sharp bend when his eyes fell on an uncanny creature standing at the water's edge, gazing into the water. The thing stood about 6 feet 6, would weigh 250 pounds, had powerful shoulders and long, powerful arms. His legs were short, and his strong and bowed head was low on the shoulders with heavy jaws, and the entire body was covered with a short coat of yellowish-brown hair. While Elgin was standing there horrified looking at the beast man, it turned with cat-like quickness and gazed directly at him. Those big, bulging black eyes seemed to burn right into him, and with the swiftness of a deer, it turned and bounded away into the dense woods. Elgin went back to camp and reported what he had seen, and a crowd went back with him to the place, and there in the sand were the tracks of the monster measuring 16 inches in length and about 8 inches across the toes. Grizz put the hounds on the trail, and when they took the scent, they lifted their bristles and started working very cautiously along the trail. Grizz watched the dogs for a minute, then whistled them back to him, remarking, "I guess that's a little bigger game than you boys are used to, and besides, it's a 2-to-1 bet that this thing is what got John Jensen." The story soon reached the outside world, and it was learned that there was a legend among the Indians about the tribe of Swalahilis that lived on the Sixes River and were called Indian devils by the natives. They were feared above all things else, and no Indian would ever venture into the upper Sixes River country for fear of meeting one of them. The Sixes River mining district, although very rich, soon became very unpopular on account of the incident, and by midwinter only a half dozen of men were left. Among them was Grizz, who lived alone in Butchertown, working his claims or hunting as the occasion would permit. One day in midwinter, old Grizz took his dogs up among the crags and caverns on Mount Avery to try for a bear, as they usually went up there to keg up during the rough winter storms. He got up to a good vantage point where he could cover the landscape, and he started the hounds out to bolt the game. The dogs had been gone but a short time when they began to bay savagely. Thinking that they had tackled a bad lion that would stand and fight, he started for them, and just as he got in sight, he saw the Indian devil spring on one of the hounds. It was like a flash, and the dog was hurled off a bluff and fell lifeless among the rocks 80 feet below. And before he could raise his rifle to shoot, the other dog followed and was also crushed on the rocks below. He fired at the monster as it disappeared, but was not sure if he had hit it. He was now helpless with his dogs both gone, and he could not follow the thing into his den, so he had to give up the fight. The incident caused a still further thinning of the ranks of the miners till there were only 2 men left, an old fellow that they called Ramrod at Wendellville, and old Grizz at Butchertown. Along in the spring, Ramrod came out and reported that he had not seen Grizz since the dogs were killed, and it was supposed that he too had gone, until some 10 years later, when some men were opening up his claim, they found the skeleton of a man buried under a pile of boulders in the ground sluice, which was identified as that of Magdigan's by his buoy and his dragoon. How he had come by his death is still a mystery to this day. A little plot on Huckleberry Knoll overlooking Bear Pen Flat holds the remains of 4 men whose deaths are still a mystery. They are Johnson, McClone, Magdigan, and Jensen. Only 2 years ago, I visited the spot and noticed the brush has encroached on its sacred bounds until it's hard to find the place. However, theirs must be a peaceful rest beneath the tall wavering firs, where the summer breezes hum in pleasant chime and the winter blasts throb with sullen roar. All 4 of them have gone to the land from which no traveler returns, leaving no trace of light on the mystery that surrounded their untimely demise. What a story that was, right? That was a crazy one. All right, let's get into these other 2 stories I got coming up for you. So stay tuned. Let's get to it. 8-Man Story of the South Sixes by Old Timer. One of the most remote stories of the southwestern Oregon country is the legend of the South Sixes River 8-Man. The folklore of the very early day miners of the Sixes goldfield is spiced with the tales of an uncanny creature resembling a huge monkey. Most of those that had ever come in contact with Old Saucer Eyes, as he was called, were shocked by his sudden appearance and surprised at his rapid getaway. It was a saying among the miners that one could be on the constant lookout for the old scamp and never see him, but the very minute you would forget about him, he would bob up and scare the wits out of you. Some very exciting and yet amusing incidents have been related by the early day miners in the Sixes district. One of the wild men tales that held the middle of the stage back in the days was that of a Swede who had located on the upper Rusty Creek. Ban Jensen was the name of this big blonde from Stockholm. When Ban blew into the diggings, the miners along Rusty took a liking to the big lad and helped him with his location, and also to build a cabin. Ban soon found himself snugly tucked into a fairly good quarters with a stretch of creek bed that looked good as a plaster mine. Ben had heard of Old Saucer Eyes, and when some of the miners were giving him an earful of the 8-Man stuff, he listened intently. When he got the full story, he laughed long and loud, and then said, "Okay, so this writer wrote Ban's language, like how he's talking, I guess, phonetically here. It's a little weird, so bear with me, guys. By Yinny Yang Tank Day's Bane Foolery Story." What? Literally, it's by Yimini A Tank Day's Bane Foolery Story. Use last das old monkey come by my shack and I knock a dust stoofing out of him. I gave him a good lacking. Ban's idea of Old Saucer Eyes was the source of a great deal of merriment among the miners, and some of them hoped that the old guy would pay a visit to Jensen's camp. Time drew along, and Ban had reached bedrock and was beginning to make it pay. He was all absorbed in his work and was more than pleased with his prospects, as he had picked up a few of the nuggets for which Rusty Creek was famous. One fine balmy evening, Ban was starting to clean up his sluices when he noticed the water was muddy and came down the sluices in rushes. This puzzled him, and he started up the line to see what the trouble was. He had taken but a few steps when he looked up, and to his amazement there was Old Saucer Eyes walking leisurely down in his sluices. The sight paralyzed Ban for a moment. He tried to yell but could not. The next thing that entered his mind was to run. By Yiminy A go now before day's big monkey eat me up. And with this, Ban got in high I'm a leaving the country gear. He started down the narrow trail at full speed ahead, and after a quarter-of-a-mile dash, he heard a noise in the trees. And looking up, he saw Old Saucer Eyes jumping from tree to tree along over the trail and keeping those big yellow eyes riveted on the fleeing Swede. Yumpin' Yiminy, I think maybe he gonna get me yet, thought Ban as he doubled his efforts for speed. Just as he rounded another curve, a loud whoop greeted his ears. It's you being too bad for yourself now, thought Ban, and when he came to his senses, he saw 2 of the miners, and with their rifles across their shoulders, standing by the trail. "What's the hurry, lad?" they called to him. "Oh, by Yingo, yeah, you running away. Old monkey face trying to catch me. He gonna come pretty quick." The 2 hunters coaxed the Swede to go back with them, whereupon they went cautiously back up the train, and seeing nothing of the beast, continued back to Ban's cabin. It was late when they got to the cabin, and the men decided to stay all night, thinking they might get a shot at Old Saucer Eyes if he should return. However, nothing ever showed up. Although the men kept a close watch all night, Ban was all worked up over his big scare and stuck to his story that Old Saucer Eyes was trying to catch him. He only stayed to work out his claim when Adolf Mueller, a husky German, went in with him. Ad and Ban did well on the claim, which was the last claim on Rusty Creek that paid. It is said to have been very rich in coarse gold and specimen quartz. Some of the boulder piles that Ban and Ad put up still remain, but few of the present-day prospectors ever suspect what panorama was enacted at this place these many years ago. The Sixes Wild Man, again. Harry Bings, who is horror of the miners. He hurls 4-pound rocks through the air like baseballs. The appearance again of the wild man of the Sixes has thrown some of the miners into a state of excitement and fear. A report says the wild man has been seen 3 times since the 10th of last month. The first appearance occurred on Thompson's Flat. William Ward and a young man named by the name of Burleson were sitting by the fire of their cabins one night when they heard something walking around the cabin, which resembled a man walking. And when it came to the corner of the cabin, it took hold of the corner and gave the building a vigorous shake, and kept up a frightful noise all the time. The same that has so many times warned the venturesome miners of the approach of the hairy man and caused them to flee in abject fear. Mr. Ward walked to the cabin door and could see a monster plainly as it walked away and took a shot at it with his rifle, but the bullet went wild off its mark. The last appearance of the animal was at the Harrison cabin only a few days ago. Mr. Ward was at the Harrison's cabin this time and again figured in the excitement. About 5 o'clock in the morning, the wild man gave the door of the cabin a vigorous shaking, which aroused Ward and one of the Harrison boys, who took their guns and started in to do the disturber. Ward fired at the man, and he answered by sending a 4-pound rocket at Ward's head, but the aim was a little too high. He then disappeared in the brush. Many of the miners avow that the wild man is a reality. They have seen him and know whereof they speak. They say he is something after the fashion of a gorilla, and unlike anything else, either in appearance or action. He can outrun or jump anything else that has ever been known. And not only that, but he can throw rocks with wonderful force and accuracy. He is about 7 feet high, has broad hands and feet, and his body is covered by a prolific growth of hair. In short, he looks like the very devil. Myrtle Point Enterprise, Salem, Oregon, March 30th, 1904. So there you have it. Another video in the books. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Those were some crazy stories. But look at this area. I mean, look how wild it is still. Around there's a lot of logging, but right in this area right here, look how wild it is. The Sixes River in Oregon. Those stories were crazy. So leave me some comments. Let me know what you guys thought about those stories. If you liked the video, go ahead and hit that like button for me. Share the video, all that good stuff. I really do appreciate it. If you're new to the channel, please think about subscribing. Appreciate that. Hit that notification bell. And until next time, where there's a WILLSTAR, there's a way. We'll see you guys later.